The purple suns of Kethvar cast long shadows across the crystal mining facility as Zara Lynn knelt in the punishment courtyard. Her scaled hands trembled as she clutched her youngest daughter, barely 3 cycles old, while her other 2 daughters huddled behind her. The crowd of Kethvari workers had gathered in a circle, their reptilian faces showing no emotion as the overseer read her sentence. Zara Lynn of the Northern Cliffs, you have failed your breeding obligations for the 3rd time. 3 daughters, no sons. The Empire requires strong males for our armies, not weak females for the breeding pools. The overseer's voice carried across the courtyard like grinding stone. His ceremonial staff gleamed in the alien sunlight as he pointed it toward her. You will be stripped of your worker status and sent to the punishment mines. Your daughters will be given to more worthy families. Zara Lynn's heart hammered against her chest. She had known this day would come. On Kethvar, a female who failed to produce male offspring after 3 attempts was considered defective. The punishment mines meant certain death within a year, but losing her daughters meant something far worse than death. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible. They are good children, strong, smart. They can work, they can contribute. The overseer's laugh was like breaking glass. Females contribute through breeding or service, nothing more. Your genetic line has proven worthless. From the crowd, other mothers looked away. They had their own families to protect, their own fears to harbor. The Empire's laws were absolute. No one dared challenge them. That's when the air above the courtyard began to shimmer. A transport vessel materialized, its hull gleaming silver and blue. The design was unlike anything the Kethvari had seen before. Smooth curves replaced harsh angles, and the landing was silent where their own ships roared and belched smoke. Workers stepped back as the ship settled onto the crystal-paved ground. The hatch opened with a soft hiss, and a figure emerged. The being walked upright like a Kethvari, but its skin was the color of rich earth instead of scales. Dark hair fell in waves around its shoulders, and its eyes were the blue of deep water. It wore simple clothes that seemed to shift and adapt to the environment, and on its chest was a symbol none of them recognized. The overseer stepped forward, his staff raised. You trespass on Imperial territory, alien. State your business or be destroyed. The human woman looked around the courtyard, taking in the scene. Her eyes settled on Zara Lynn and her daughters, then moved to the punishment platform, the chains, and the crowd of silent workers. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Human Diplomatic Corps. I'm here under the Galactic Protection Protocols to investigate reports of systematic persecution. She pulled out a small device that projected a holographic document into the air. This gives me authority to intervene in cases of humanitarian crisis. The overseer's eyes narrowed. Humans, we have heard whispers. You claim authority you do not possess. This is Kethvari justice for Kethvari crimes. Sarah stepped closer to Zara Lynn, ignoring the threatening posture of the guards. She knelt beside the trembling mother and spoke in surprisingly fluent Kethvari. What is your name? Zara Lynn, came the whispered reply. And your daughters? Kira Lynn, Mira Lynn, and little Sarah Lynn. Sarah nodded and stood, turning to face the overseer. When she spoke this time, her voice carried an edge that made even the guards step back slightly. You're punishing this woman for something completely beyond her control. On my world, we learned long ago that gender is determined by genetic factors from both parents. If you want male offspring, you need to look at your male's genetic contribution, not blame the females. The overseer's crest rose in anger. You dare question our sacred laws? Our breeding science? I question any law that punishes innocent people for biological processes they cannot control. Sarah's eyes swept the crowd. And I especially question any society that throws away half its population based on gender. Murmurs rippled through the workers. Some looked confused, others frightened. A few seemed intrigued by this strange alien's words. "You know nothing of our ways," the overseer snarled. "Females are weak. They cannot fight, cannot build, cannot lead." Sarah smiled, and there was something dangerous in that expression. "Would you like me to demonstrate exactly how weak human females can be?" Before the overseer could respond, Sarah moved. Her hand shot out and grabbed his ceremonial staff. With a twist that seemed effortless, she yanked it from his grasp and spun it in a fluid motion that sent it flying across the courtyard to embed itself in the crystal wall. The crowd gasped. Guards reached for their weapons, but Sarah had already moved again. In seconds, she was behind the overseer with one hand on his shoulder in what looked like a casual gesture, but was clearly a restraining hold. "I could break your neck before your guards could draw their weapons," she said conversationally. "But I won't, because unlike your society, mine values life. All life." She released him and stepped back. "Now let's discuss this like civilized beings." The overseer staggered, his face a mixture of rage and fear. "Guards, seize the alien!" The guards hesitated. They had never seen anyone move that fast, and the casual way the human had disarmed their superior was deeply unsettling. Sarah looked at them calmly. "I wouldn't recommend it. My ship's defense systems are currently targeting this courtyard. Any aggressive action will result in your immediate incapacitation." As if to emphasize her point, the air around them hummed with energy, and targeting lights appeared on several guards' chests. "What do you want?" the overseer demanded. "Justice," Sarah replied simply, "and this woman and her daughters are coming with me." "Impossible! They are criminals! They belong to the Empire!" Sarah knelt beside Zara Lynn again. "What do you want?" she asked gently. "I can offer you and your daughters sanctuary on a human world, or I can help you fight for change here. But the choice is yours." Zara Lynn looked into those alien blue eyes and saw something she had never seen before in an authority figure. Genuine compassion. "My daughters," she whispered. "Will they be safe?" "Safer than they'll ever be here," Sarah promised. "Humans value intelligence, creativity, and courage above all else. Gender is irrelevant to us." Behind them, more ships began to appear in the sky. The rumble of engines filled the air as human vessels took positions around the mining facility. The overseer's face had gone pale. "You bring an invasion force?" "Diplomatic security," Sarah corrected. "Though I admit, the line can be thin when dealing with those who abuse the innocent." She stood and addressed the crowd. "Anyone who wishes to leave is welcome to request asylum. We have refugee processing centers on 3 nearby systems. You'll be given new homes, new opportunities, and most importantly, you'll be judged by your actions and abilities, not your gender or genetics." Shocked murmurs rippled through the workers. Several mothers pushed forward, their own children in tow. "This is impossible," the overseer shouted. "You cannot simply steal our population." "I'm not stealing anyone," Sarah replied. "I'm offering choices, something your society seems to have forgotten how to do." She helped Zara Lynn to her feet, keeping one protective arm around the small family. "The transport will be here for another hour. Anyone who wants to leave should make their decision quickly." As they walked toward the human ship, Zara Lynn found her voice. "Why? Why are you helping us?" Sarah paused at the ship's ramp and looked back at the mining facility, at the punishment platform, at the crowd of workers still debating whether to trust these strange aliens. "Because a long time ago, my people learned that societies rise or fall based on how they treat their most vulnerable members. You and your daughters aren't criminals or defects. You're exactly what any smart civilization would want: intelligent, caring individuals with unlimited potential." She guided them up the ramp. "And because no one should ever be punished for bringing life into the universe." As the ship's hatch closed behind them, Zara Lynn looked through the viewport at the mining facility growing smaller below. For the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The human ships maintained their positions as more Kethvari made their choices. Some approached the transports, others stayed behind. But the Empire's absolute authority had been challenged, and word would spread. In the ship's medical bay, human doctors gently examined Zara Lynn and her daughters, treating malnutrition and old injuries with technologies the Kethvari had never dreamed of. Other refugees filled the corridors, all of them wearing the same expression of wonder and disbelief. Sarah found Zara Lynn in the observation lounge, watching the stars through the transparent walls. "What happens now?" Zara Lynn asked. "Now you get to choose," Sarah replied. "What do you want to do with your life? What do you want for your daughters?" Zara Lynn was quiet for a long moment. "I was trained as a geological engineer before I was assigned to breeding duty. I designed mining systems. The colony on New Geneva could use geological engineers. Great schools, too, for your daughters. And if I wanted to return someday, to help change things on Kethvar?" Sarah smiled. "Then we'd help you do that, too. Change has to come from within, but sometimes it needs a catalyst from outside." As the human fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying its precious cargo of refugees toward new lives and new hope, the Empire of Kethvar faced its first real challenge to absolute authority. The revolution had begun with a single act of human compassion, and it would spread across the galaxy like wildfire. 3 months had passed since the rescue at Kethvar, and Zara Lynn still couldn't believe the transformation in her life. She stood in the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching her daughters play in the zero-gravity recreation area with human children and other refugee species. Their laughter echoed through the transparent dome as they spun and tumbled in ways that would have been impossible on the heavy-gravity mining worlds. Kira Lynn, her eldest at 12 cycles, had already been accepted into the advanced engineering program. Her teachers marveled at her intuitive understanding of crystal resonance patterns and mineral structures. The humans had recognized something the Kethvari Empire had dismissed. Brilliance had no gender. Mira Lynn, now 10, had discovered art. The Human Cultural Center had given her access to paints, clay, and holographic design tools. Her sculptures blended Kethvari crystal formations with flowing human aesthetics in ways that made gallery visitors stop and stare. On Kethvar, such creativity would have been seen as a waste of time for a female. Little Sarah Lynn, barely 4 cycles old, was learning 3 languages simultaneously in the colony's educational program. She switched between Kethvari, Standard Galactic, and English with the fluid ease that made her teachers predict a future in xenolinguistics. "They're beautiful," said a voice behind her. Zara Lynn turned to see Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human psychiatrist who had been helping the refugees process their trauma. The middle-aged woman had become something of a surrogate mother figure to many of the displaced families. "On Kethvar, we were taught that daughters were burdens," Zara Lynn said softly. "Now I see what gifts they truly are." Elena nodded. "Trauma recovery isn't just about healing the past. It's about learning to see possibilities you never knew existed." They watched as Sarah Lynn executed a perfect spiral in the low gravity, her crystalline scales catching the light like tiny prisms. The human children cheered and tried to copy her movement. "I received a message from Captain Chen today," Elena continued. "She's requesting your assistance with something important." Zara Lynn felt a familiar mix of gratitude and nervousness whenever Sarah's name was mentioned. The human had saved their lives, but Zara Lynn still struggled to understand why. "What kind of assistance?" "She's planning to return to Kethvari space. Intelligence reports suggest that other mining colonies are beginning to question the Empire's breeding policies. Word of the rescue has spread, but so has Imperial crackdown. The former prisoner felt her stomach clench. She wants to go back? She wants to establish a permanent human diplomatic presence in the system. But she needs someone who understands Kethvari culture and engineering to help design safe extraction points for refugees. Zara Lynn was quiet for a long moment. The thought of returning to that space, even on a human ship, brought back memories of fear and helplessness. But she also thought about all the other mothers still kneeling in punishment courtyards, all the daughters being dismissed as worthless. "My children," she said finally, "would be completely safe here. New Geneva has the best schools in this sector. And they've already formed strong bonds with their teachers and friends. And if something happened to me..." Elena's expression grew serious. "Sarah Chen doesn't lose people under her protection. But yes, we've made arrangements. Your daughters would be cared for and educated regardless." Through the observation window, Zara Lynn watched Kira Lynn helping a younger human child master a complex maneuver. The sight filled her with pride and something else. The realization that her daughter was becoming someone who helped others, someone who led through kindness rather than fear. "When does she leave?" Zara Lynn asked. 2 weeks later, Zara Lynn found herself aboard the human diplomatic vessel Compassionate Thunder, a name that seemed to perfectly capture humanity's approach to conflict resolution. The ship was larger than the transport that had rescued her, with laboratories, cultural analysis centers, and what the humans called a refuge processing facility. Captain Chen met her in the ship's main briefing room, along with a team of specialists that included xenoanthropologists, military advisors, and what appeared to be a Kethvari male in human diplomatic uniform. "Zara Lynn, I'd like you to meet Commander Kethmar," Sarah said. "He was one of the first Kethvari to request asylum 6 months ago." The male rose and performed the traditional greeting, touching his forehead with both hands. Zara Lynn responded automatically, though she was deeply confused. Males rarely spoke to unrelated females in Kethvari society. "Honored to meet you, Engineer Zara Lynn," Kethmar said. "Your geological surveys of the crystal formations were required reading in military engineering school." Zara Lynn stared. "You know my work?" "Before I was assigned to breeding oversight, I was a structural engineer. Your papers on resonance-based excavation revolutionized our mining efficiency. It was troubling to learn that such brilliance was being wasted in the breeding pools." Sarah smiled. Commander Kethmar left the Imperial forces when he realized that half their greatest minds were being systematically silenced. He's been invaluable in helping us understand the cultural changes needed for long-term reform. "Changes?" Zara Lynn asked. Sarah activated the briefing room's holographic display. The three-dimensional image showed the Kethvar system, with dozens of mining colonies and industrial platforms highlighted in different colors. "Green indicates colonies where reform movements have begun," Sarah explained. "Yellow shows facilities where unrest is growing. Red marks locations where imperial crackdowns have intensified." Zara Lynn studied the display. Nearly a quarter of the colonies showed green or yellow indicators. "This many?" "Your rescue wasn't just about saving your family," Sarah said gently. "It was about demonstrating that change was possible, that someone would stand up to imperial authority." Commander Kethmar pointed to several red zones. "These facilities have implemented even harsher punishments. Mothers are now separated from daughters immediately after birth. The Empire believes that preventing emotional bonds will reduce resistance." The words hit Zara Lynn like a physical blow. She thought of mothers across the system, forced to hand over their newborn daughters to strangers, never knowing if they would see them again. "What can we do?" she asked. Sarah's expression grew determined. "We're going to establish refugee extraction points at 3 key locations, but we need someone who can design concealed communication networks using the existing crystal matrix systems." Zara Lynn's engineering mind immediately began working on the problem. Crystal formations could indeed carry resonant communication signals, especially if the frequencies were properly modulated. How long would the network need to remain hidden? Long enough for reform movements to gain strength and coordinate across colonies. Maybe 6 months. And if the Empire discovers the networks? Then we extract as many people as possible and prepare for a longer conflict, Sarah said honestly. But our intelligence suggests that the Empire is more fragile than it appears. There's discontent, even among the ruling caste. Commander Kethmar nodded. Many males have begun questioning policies that waste so much talent. The Empire's enemies are growing stronger while we throw away half our intellectual resources. Dr. Vasquez, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. This isn't just about changing laws. It's about changing a fundamental worldview that's been in place for millennia. That kind of transformation requires people like you, Zara Lynn. People who've lived the oppression but can articulate why change is necessary. Zara Lynn thought about her daughters, safe and thriving on New Geneva. Then she thought about all the other daughters still trapped in a system that saw them as failures from birth. "Show me the target colonies," she said. The next several hours were spent in intensive planning. Zara Lynn worked with the human engineers to design communication networks that would appear to be natural crystal formations. The signals would be undetectable to standard Imperial scanning equipment, but could carry complex data between reform groups. Commander Kethmar provided detailed intelligence about guard rotations, inspection schedules, and the political leanings of various colony administrators. Several mining bosses were already secretly sympathetic to reform, but lacked the courage to act openly. "The key is demonstrating that resistance is possible," Sarah explained as they finalized the mission parameters. "Once people see that the Empire can be challenged successfully, more will find the courage to act." As the ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Kethvari territory, Zara Lynn felt her hands begin to shake. The familiar constellations brought back memories of punishment courtyards and separation chambers. Sarah noticed her distress and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this. We can find another way." Zara Lynn took a deep breath and thought about Sarah Lynn's laughter echoing through the station's observation dome. "No, this is exactly what I have to do." The first colony they approached was Minar Seth, a medium-sized crystal processing facility with a population of nearly 50,000. Intelligence reports indicated strong reform sentiment among the workers, but also suggested that Imperial security had been increased. Zara Lynn studied the geological surveys of the colony's underground networks. The crystal formations were perfect for her purposes, with natural resonance chambers that could amplify signals across vast distances. "I can establish the network," she told Sarah, "but someone will need to make contact with the local reform leaders to explain how to use it." "That's my job," Commander Kethmar said. "I still have contacts in the military engineering corps." As the human ship took position in the asteroid field surrounding Minar Seth, Zara Lynn realized that she was no longer the frightened mother kneeling in a punishment courtyard. She was an engineer with a mission, a survivor with the power to help others survive. The revolution was about to enter its next phase, and this time she would be more than just a victim saved by human compassion. She would be an agent of change, carrying hope into the darkness of Imperial oppression. The crystal networks would sing with messages of freedom, and the Empire would learn that some ideas are too powerful to contain. 1 year after the first rescue mission, the Kethvari Empire was crumbling from within. Zara Lynn stood in the command center of the newly established Human Kethvari Cooperative Station, watching real-time reports flood in from across the system. Her hands moved expertly across the crystal communication array she had helped design, coordinating refugee evacuations and supply drops to embattled reform colonies. The transformation had been faster and more complete than anyone had dared hope. What began as desperate whispers between oppressed mothers had evolved into a full-scale liberation movement that spanned dozens of worlds. The crystal networks Zara Lynn had installed carried not just messages, but hope itself across the vast mining colonies. "Status report from Sector 7, announced Commander Kethmar from his station nearby. His voice carried pride and disbelief in equal measure. "The Talvari Mining Collective has officially declared independence from the Empire. That makes 43 colonies now under reformed governance." Captain Sarah Chen looked up from her tactical display, where she had been coordinating with human fleet elements throughout the system. "Any Imperial response?" "3 destroyer squadrons moving to intercept, but our intelligence suggests their crews are increasingly unreliable. Half the Imperial fleet has requested transfer to reform sectors." Dr. Vasquez entered the command center, carrying a tablet full of refugee integration reports. "The psychological impact assessments are remarkable. Former prisoners are showing recovery rates that exceed our best-case projections." She handed the tablet to Zara Lynn. "Your daughter's interviews are particularly telling." Zara Lynn scrolled through the data, finding her children's responses to questions about their future aspirations. Kira Lynn wanted to become a starship engineer. Mira Lynn dreamed of opening an interspecies art academy, and little Sarah Lynn had announced her intention to become a helper person like Miss Sarah. "They don't even remember being afraid," Zara Lynn murmured. "For them, the idea that gender determines worth is just an old story." "That's how generational change happens," Sarah observed. "The children who grow up free can't imagine being enslaved." An urgent chime drew their attention back to the displays. A massive Imperial dreadnought was approaching the station, its weapons powered but not targeting. "This is Admiral Morthek of the Imperial Navy," came a transmission. "I request permission to board your station under diplomatic immunity." The command staff exchanged glances. Admiral Morthek was known throughout the system as one of the Empire's most ruthless enforcers. His fleet had been responsible for crushing 3 early reform attempts with overwhelming force. "Could be a trap," Commander Kethmar warned. Sarah considered for a moment, then activated the communication system. "Admiral, this is Captain Chen. You may bring a small diplomatic party aboard. Any aggressive action will result in immediate destruction of your vessel." "Understood. I come seeking terms." Terms. The word hung in the air like a crystal formation waiting to ring. The Empire was ready to negotiate. An hour later, Admiral Morthek materialized in the station's main conference room, along with 2 aides. Zara Lynn was surprised to see that one of the aides was female, wearing the uniform of an Imperial engineer rather than the simple robes typically assigned to women. The Admiral himself was ancient by Kethvari standards, his scales showing the deep blue coloration that came with extreme age. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. "I have come to discuss the surrender of Imperial forces and the transition to reformed governance," he said without preamble. Sarah leaned back in her chair. "That's remarkably direct for a diplomatic opening." "I am too old for pretense, Captain Chen. The Empire is broken, not destroyed by external force, but broken by the revelation of its own stupidity." He gestured toward his aide. "This is Engineer Parlin, one of the finest strategic minds in our Navy. For 40 years, I ignored her insights because she was female. Last month, her tactical analysis saved my entire fleet from a human ambush." The female engineer stepped forward. "I have studied human military doctrine extensively, Admiral. Your forces employ strategies that assume the full intellectual resources of your population. Ours threw away half our strategic capability because of ancient prejudices." Zara Lynn found herself studying the Imperial engineer with new eyes. Here was a woman who had somehow risen through the ranks despite the Empire's limitations, forced to work twice as hard for half the recognition. "What are your terms?" Sarah asked. "Complete amnesty for Imperial personnel who agree to serve under reformed governance. Immediate release of all female prisoners from punishment facilities. Recognition of human sovereignty over refugee populations." The Admiral paused. "And full integration of female citizens into all aspects of society." Commander Kethmar leaned forward. "The traditional caste will never accept such changes." "The traditional caste has a choice," Admiral Morthek replied grimly. "Accept reform or face complete economic collapse. The reformed colonies are outproducing Imperial facilities by factors of 3 to 1. When you utilize your entire population's capabilities, efficiency increases dramatically." Dr. Vasquez consulted her notes. "Our preliminary studies suggest that Kethvari females show superior performance in fields requiring long-term thinking and collaborative problem-solving. The Empire was quite literally discarding its most valuable citizens." "Precisely why I am here," the Admiral confirmed. "I have 300 ships under my command, and crews who have seen the results of reform with their own eyes. Continued resistance is not just futile, it's economically suicidal." Zara Lynn had remained silent throughout the exchange, but now she felt compelled to speak. "What about the children?" "The daughters who were taken from their families and placed in service pools." Engineer Parlin's expression grew pained. "Recovery operations are already underway. We're using the crystal communication networks your people established to coordinate family reunifications. It's difficult work. Many of the children have no memory of their birth families." "Then we help them build new families," Sarah said firmly. "Human adoption protocols are very flexible, and our colony worlds have extensive support systems for displaced children." The negotiations continued for hours, covering everything from economic integration to judicial reforms. As details were hammered out, Zara Lynn found herself thinking about the punishment courtyard where this had all began. The platform where she had knelt in desperation now seemed like a symbol from another age, a relic of a system that could never return. 3 days later, Zara Lynn stood again in an observation lounge, but this time she was watching something entirely different. Below them, the first graduating class of the reformed Kethvari Engineering Academy was receiving their certificates. Half the graduates were female, including several who had been rescued from punishment facilities. Her own daughter, Kira Lynn, was among them, having completed an accelerated program that combined human and Kethvari techniques. The young woman who had once faced a life of servitude was now qualified to design starships that could travel between worlds. "Proud?" asked Sarah, joining her at the viewport. "Amazed," Zara Lynn replied. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a dream." "Not a dream, just what becomes possible when you stop limiting people based on arbitrary categories." They watched as the graduates posed for holographic portraits with their families. Former prisoners stood beside reformed Imperial officials. Human teachers exchanged ideas with Kethvari scholars, and children who might never have met under the old system played together in the Academy's gardens. "What's next for you?" Sarah asked. Zara Lynn smiled. "The Exploration Council has offered me a position designing crystal communication systems for first contact missions. Apparently, the techniques we developed for the revolution have applications for peaceful diplomacy." "And personally?" "Commander Kethmar has asked me to consider a formal bonding. It seems that reformed Kethvari relationships are based on mutual respect rather than breeding obligations." She paused. "It's strange to imagine choosing a partner based on love rather than assignment." Sarah nodded. "Love is usually a much better foundation for lasting relationships." A chime announced an incoming priority message. Admiral Morthek's face appeared on the display, his expression more relaxed than Zara Lynn had ever seen it. "Captain Chen, Engineer Zaralin, I wanted to inform you that the last Imperial holdout facility has agreed to reformation terms. As of today, every Kethvari installation in the system operates under reformed governance. The announcement was met with cheers from the graduates below. Spontaneous celebrations broke out across the academy grounds as the news spread. There's one more thing, the Admiral continued. The Reformed Council has voted unanimously to establish a new position, Director of Interspecies Cooperation. We would like to offer this position to the human who made our transformation possible. Sarah looked surprised. Admiral, I'm honored, but the position would be based here, working with both human and Kethvari governments to prevent similar oppression from developing elsewhere in the galaxy. We've discovered that 17 other species maintain gender-based caste systems similar to our own former structure. Zaralin saw the spark of interest in Sarah's eyes. The humans' drive to help oppressed populations hadn't been satisfied by solving one system's problems. Think about it, the Admiral concluded. The galaxy is full of mothers kneeling in punishment courtyards, waiting for someone to tell them they deserve better. After the transmission ended, Sarah and Zaralin stood in comfortable silence, watching the celebrations continue below. The reformed Kethvari were learning to express joy in ways their culture had never allowed before. Will you take the position? Zaralin asked. Sarah smiled. How can I not? There are too many daughters out there who haven't learned they can reach for the stars. As the station's artificial sun set over the academy grounds, Zaralin reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun with a desperate mother's plea for mercy had become a transformation that spanned worlds and species. The Empire had fallen not through conquest, but through the simple revelation that every person had value regardless of gender, species, or origin. The children playing in the gardens below would grow up in a galaxy where such oppression seemed as ancient and impossible as the myths of old. And somewhere among the stars, other mothers were still waiting for someone to tell them that they deserved better. Thanks to humans like Sarah Chen and reformed Kethvari like herself, that wait was growing shorter every day. The revolution was complete, but the work of building a better galaxy had only just begun.